Good day, and welcome back to Mondays on Mondays. This is our next broadcast, and we appreciate you joining us. Once again, we are doing this in an effort to help communicate and provide a forum to discuss the issues of families that have children that have special health needs and special difficulties in early lives. To give you a little background from us, if you haven't seen us previously, is we've been involved for almost 30 years. My wife and I, our first child was a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, our CDH warrior here, almost 30 years ago. And CDH at that point in time was about a 30% success of survival. Now it's about 50% on average, and if it's detected and treated properly in the early phases, it can be over 80% success rate in that. But with that success rate comes issues that these children will have other developmental issues and things, some other physical issues that may come up that you'll have to address. Unsuspectedly, our second child had no issues at birth, no problems there, and as an anomaly, an idiopathic condition, she ended up with aplastic anemia, which is a full shutdown of her bone marrow system, and she required having to have a bone marrow stem cell transplant in order to survive. We were fortunate in the success of that. At the point of her birth, its success was like, it happened about 1 in 250,000 children, so it's extremely rare.
1 in 2.5 million.
Well, and then the success rate was extremely low. We were very fortunate. Both of my children at this point in time are in their 20s and healthy, but there were a lot of issues that we dealt with over time, overcoming those things. And that's part of the reason that we want to have this forum, is a way to address some of those. Part of this is we're both involved in various social medias. My son's involved in a not-for-profit organization dealing with congenital diaphragmatic hernia and trying to get better communication and understanding and making sure more people are aware of it. It's a condition that occurs in about 1 in every 2,500 to 3,000 births. So it's not that uncommon, but it's not that well known and addressed. So that's part of the reason we have this discussion, but also it's one just a chance to discuss some of the key issues that come up, hopefully provide a forum for that. Later on in the introduction, you'll see, or in the video, you'll see that we have a email address that you can contact us with any questions, comments there. And just as a disclaimer, neither one of us are medical professionals, social professionals, child development professionals, nothing in that. My background is engineering. My son is in studying psychology. So what we're doing here is just more of not providing the technical expertise, but from people who have truly lived through this life and experience. So thank you once again, and
with that, let's roll the title.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. On today's topic, what I really wanted to address is something that I just recently received, and it's from the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovation. This is an organization that's leadership team that is funded by the U.S. Department of Education, and it's based on through the Office of Special Education Programs. Many of you may be familiar with Head Start, but it's also it's got multiple levels within that program. And part of that is children that have health and developmental issues in their early days. And we've utilized these resources in our lives. Fortunately, we knew a early childhood intervention director early in our experience. You were about 2 years old at that point in time, but we'd also utilized some resources at other places. So it's critical, and this is based on the United States program, so it's going to be specific to the United States. But every state will have a program similar to this, and it's involved in how to handle childhood development from 0 to 5, and get these children that may have some delays, some difficulties, pretty much on track to be able to be successful in their public education lives. I'm just going to give some points from this, and you're going to see me going back and forth to some notes here, because this just came out recently. I just got it a couple of weeks ago. It was just published in June of this year. And the website for this is challengingbehavior.org.
Okay.
But, and you can go there and see some of this.
And we'll try and put a link in the description to that.
Okay, we can put that into the system so that way you can see what that is, but into the broadcast. But this is trying to build a capacity for states and the programs and the parents and the professionals to work together, developing a knowledge base on effective practices for equitable implementation of this program. Provide a web-based resources, and that's the thing. If you go to this website, it will give you links to many things. As I said, I'm going to refer back to my notes here and what I have. This is just 14 slides, but on each of those are 3 or 4 links to other sites that provide much more detail. So there's a lot more than we're going to be able to discuss in just our 20 minutes or so here, but hopefully it gives you an idea of what's available.
We may do this as a 2-part. We'll come back to this next week.
Yeah, we'll probably hit on this multiple times. It's also how do we providing technical assistance in providing states and the programs with the materials that they need, providing intensive, sustained technical assistance to the states to support the local implementation and the scale up of this model, because what they are looking at is a point of, the expression that it takes a village to raise a child. And part of this is that you've got to be able, as we've mentioned in previous things, that you need to be able to work with your physicians, your medical team, your nurses, your therapists, but also your early intervention specialist, and others in the programs to help you as a parent and as a family, working with your the grandparents, the siblings, other family members, and how to best handle the developmental issues with your child and help them to reach that point. And then monitoring diverse future leaders in the field to understand, promote, and evaluate the implementation and scale up of early childhood development programs and the framework that's needed, from the social, emotional, and behavioral development of infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, focusing on equity and social justice. So it's a matter of getting past some of the issues that come into the stigma of having a special needs child. And
I'll just cut you
okay,
here just for a few minutes, because it's one, there are going to be a lot of people that are going to comment on this video probably and say, oh, there's no stigma. I at 28 still experience the stigma around being an adult with health issues. That stigma does not go away, and it's not just something that's going to end.
No, it's something in our culture, and it's an issue of you know, if you have a child that doesn't have some of the typical physical issues involved, then you have this stigma that, well, you know, you just think you've got a problem because you're not a cerebral palsy child, or you're not a Down syndrome child, or you're not something like that.
Yeah.
And in the early days, it was a stigma with even cerebral palsy that, oh, well, you know, they can't think and develop at the rate of others. I know several people that I've known through the years with cerebral palsy who were extremely intelligent and very successful in their careers.
Yeah.
Draftsmen, architects, various others, because they weren't able to do some of the physical aspects, but that didn't mean that they could not go through the thought processes of how to build and construct buildings or items for utilities and things like that. So there's a lot of those capabilities that we need to eliminate that special needs stigma and get to a point where we think these are specially equipped individuals, and they deal with things in a different way. In your case, I know with your work environment is sometimes it's difficult for them to understand that you will have breathing problems and difficulty with oxygen saturation and those items.
Yeah.
Because it's not physically seen.
Yeah.
You don't see that there is a disability or a defect or a problem physically, so you don't understand the impact on that overall.
Yeah. And I was going to touch on this from an interesting perspective, because it's one between myself and then I've got a coworker that has epilepsy.
Yes.
That you'd be surprised. Most people probably would be surprised, but those that have been through it aren't. There's still a good bit of stigma around stuff like that.
Yeah.
And why should we make special accommodation for something like that?
Right, and it's one. Some of this is transpired in the decades during my existence with the Americans with Disabilities Act and some of those programs that have been instituted, so that we try and provide a level playing field for people who may have unique requirements in how they do their jobs.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it can go all kinds of things. People that are overweight, people that are short, people that are tall. You know, all kinds of different things that can impact the way you would typically expect to do your job.
Yeah.
But really what we're talking about now is how to handle that transition. We have early intervention specialists who are able to work in programs, and that's where I've advocated for people on this program, and then on social media aspects that I have, is contact and find your local early intervention specialist.
Yeah.
And find the support that they have, because they can help you work with everything from hearing and speech issues, feeding issues, weight gain, occupational developmental issues, physical development issues, and how you can work on those to help alleviate the problem as your child goes into the public school system and into the public in general, and how to deal with those things.
Yeah.
So those are aspects that we're looking at, and that's part of what this pyramid model is looking at how do you plan, develop, and evaluate a program and the activities and the systems that are available that can fit into this. So there's a critical part of this is how the families are involved in that intervention. And part of what this program is looking at is, you know, you're going to be making a transition. You've got a child that's, you know, needed physical therapy, occupational therapy, some of those special things, may need some special tools to be able to write, communicate, those type of things.
Yeah.
you're doing that through the early intervention programs up until they're 5, then you're going to have to transition that into the school system. And previously what it is you had special education programs in the school systems that would develop a individual educational program or a plan of how your child needs to have some special issues and special needs, special items to help them in the classroom. What the program is looking at now is that needs to be not just the school system, but it needs to be the parents involved, the school system involved with the teachers, the therapist involved, the early intervention specialist involved, any input you need from the doctors and the folks who have worked with your child in the medical field, so that all of these questions and things are check marked as you go into the education system. And the reason we say, that there's special issues is most children the parents will go in, fill out the paperwork, put together the needed documentation for immunizations and things like that, and sign their child up for school. In this case, it's one that there needs to be some preparation made weeks, months ahead of time in preparation for a child to go into the school and understand these things. And sometimes it's a matter of, working with some of the specialists and those type of things to get in. But I'm going to hit some high points here of what we're looking at, and some of the points that they made up. It is critical to have families at the table when this is done. And, everyone involved needs to be involved in that. And the schools need to work on enhancing the relationship with the families. That understanding that some of this is providing resources for the parents so that they can provide needed help at home to help in the education process. It's also one that the families need to be leaders in a lot of things. The other is, it's the teachers need to be involved in this. And many times, I know from our experience, the program is you meet with the principal and the special ed and maybe a therapist, but the teachers are not necessarily closely involved in this. And that's something that needs to be involved, is the teachers need to be able to work on that transition and how that goes into place. You'll have to excuse me, I'm just kind of hitting on some notes, and as we said, we'll probably hit on these a little bit further at later times because we'll run out. But inclusion of children with disabilities training and building relationships with the families, because in our education system we teach teachers to teach, but we don't necessarily teach the normal classroom teacher how to deal with some of these disabilities and these special needs. And that's where it needs to have more support. And some of the difficulties are, I'm not going to get into the political aspects, but some of it is the funding and the capabilities to have the people to support in those areas.
Well, and I want to get into something else anymore. And this is not on the teaching side. This is on the school boards and everything else side of it. But we've gotten to the point that we're no longer teaching a person, we're teaching a test. We're teaching to the test, not teaching to the individual. And that's part of where all of this is starting to fail.
Another key point that I want to bring out here is one section of this talks about the strategies, response strategies when families share traumatic or difficult experiences. And this is something that if there is difficulty in the classroom or something that needs to be addressed, the parent needs to be able to be equipped to know how to communicate that quickly and get that not just to a special education teacher, but to a team that can work on helping to resolve those issues quickly. Because if not, then you end up with children that are pretty much ostracized, and it's like, well, you know, it's going to take weeks before I get back into this or deal with this issue, and the child understands that what happened. The parents understand what happened. So these are things that need to be brought up more quickly. So I do appreciate that this study was done, you know, for as part of the Department of Education, but it was also led by a number of universities. Georgetown, what do we have? Georgetown, Vanderbilt, Denver, University of South Florida. All of these schools were working on this. So they see a need, they're trying to work on a plan of how to improve that. I'm going to get some just last minute points because I know we're coming close to the end of our time. We really like to keep these to about 20 minutes. But supporting families of young children in leadership roles in these programs. So, you know, as we said, it takes a village, but it's also one, as we've brought out in our past discussions, is as a parent, you need to take the lead and you need to take responsibility in what needs to be done. It's not that you need to know what it is, but you need to have solid, serious input into the education and development of your child.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of hits the high points that we wanted to bring out, at least today. Do you have anything that you wanted to add to this?
Not necessarily. Just stay tuned for part 2 next week.
Right, and it may be a part 3, but as I said, I've just had a chance to start looking at some of this. It's very engaging in a lot of what is brought out in this. I'm just trying to hit some high points right now, but we'll also work on some of the details and try to look at what we see on the social media sites and see how some of these things fit into what we're seeing in some of the items that we see from people posting. Okay? Thank you once again for joining us for Mondays on Mondays. Have a great week.
See you next time.